The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderman Oldenburg, Alderman Cone, Alderman Narayan, Alderman Devoti, Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderwoman Sanye, Alderman Browning, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Keys, Alderwoman Tyus, Alderwoman Boyd, Alderman Aldridge, President Green,
Present.
Alderman Oldenburg, Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Tyus,
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Present.
10 present, you have quorum.
A quorum being present, we will dispense with line items 3 and 4. Any introduction of honored guests? Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, this week I am on a birthday kick, and it seems like every time I introduce somebody for the birthday, they're not here, but hopefully when the Alderwoman from the 6th get here, let's not forget to wish her a happy birthday today. It is her birthday, so if we can give her a round of applause, even though she's not here, but we should get her to say happy birthday.
Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I want to have as my honored guests the members of the fire department who responded last night overnight to a tragic fire in my ward that burned the Lyle House, one of the oldest framed buildings in the city of St. Louis, the oldest house of its kind west of the Mississippi, actually, and it's absolutely tragic that the building has been all but destroyed, and I'm having trouble controlling my emotions this morning because I'm just so angry. But at the same time, I am so grateful to the fire department for responding and what they did to save so much of the building. And I just want to make sure that the fire department, Chief Shankerson, know that they have my eternal gratitude for always showing up in emergencies in our city. Thank you.
Any further introduction of guests? Any further introduction of honored guests? Seeing none, we can dispense with line items 6 through 11. First reading of board bills.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 12. Reference to committee of board bills.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 13. Second reading and report of standing committees.
The following board bills were reported out of the HUD's committee with the due pass recommendation. Board Bill 23, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge and the following co-sponsors: Mayor Spencer, President Green, Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Sanye, Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderman Browning, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and Alderwoman Keys. An ordinance revising ordinance number 71840, which established the Impact Tenant Fund, amending Section 1 to update tenant eligibility criteria and authorizing the use of fund monies for administrative costs. Board Bill 24, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd and the following co-sponsors: Mayor Spencer, President Green, Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Sanye, Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderman Browning, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Keys, and Alderman Aldridge. An ordinance adopting the provisions of Section 137.082 revised statutes of Missouri, providing for residential property owners whose homes are severely damaged or destroyed by natural disaster, with a pro rata reduction in property tax assessment, and adopting the other assessment provisions of Section 137.082 revised statutes of Missouri pertaining to newly constructed property and containing the severability and emergency clause. That's the extent of second reading. Report of standing committee.
Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on the motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of moving Board Bills 23 and 24 to the regular perfection calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to suspend the rules to move Board Bill 23 and 24 to the regular perfection calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of moving Board Bills number 23 and 24 to the regular perfection calendar. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Devote. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. 12 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. From the Alderman from the 14th, if you could please place Board Bills 23 and 24 on the regular perfection calendar.
So noted.
Report of special committees.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 15. Board bills for perfection consent.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 16. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 23, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge and the following co-sponsors: Mayor Spencer, President Green, Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Sanye, Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderman Browning, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and Alderwoman Keys. An ordinance revising ordinance number 71840, which established the Impact Tenants Fund, amending Section 1 to update tenant eligibility criteria and authorizing the use of fund monies for administrative costs.
Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 23.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we perfect Board Bill 23.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill 23. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Board Bill 23 is, as we'll see today, a kind of a package of two bills from the legislative process to try to help residents that have been impacted by the recent tornado. Board Bill 23, Impact Attendance Fund, was a bill that we have already passed at this Board of Aldermen a few sessions ago. But what we wanted to do is clarify some language to ensure that individuals that were impacted by this tornado could also be able to tap into these funds. So when this program was originally set up, there was 100 million or 100,000. We want 100 million. We're working on that. 100,000 set aside for this fund to help tenants to be able to have support if their home was condemned to pay like their first or last month's rent. Since then, in this FY26 budget, we are seeing that the building division will be adding an additional 160,000 into this fund so that we can help people again that have been impacted by this tornado. This has been, I want to say, collaboration of many people coming to the table. I do want to thank, I've only been down here 2 years, but I've never seen the mayor be a co-sponsor on a bill. I know she's also a co-sponsor on the other bills, so I want to thank the mayor's office for supporting this legislation and working with this board of alder to try to figure out ways that we can help folks that have been impacted by the tornado. Also, I want to thank the president's office for also being a huge support, and all of us from my office and the president's office and the mayor's office coming together to try to figure out what we can do legislative-wise to help folks that have been impacted, as well as all my colleagues on the HUD's committee that had co-sponsored this piece of legislation. We are working on a small, got an email this morning, a small amendment. There's been a lot of conversations with the Department of Human Services, who would be administering this program and then sending it out to Employment Connections and the building division to ensure that the language that we have is just very clear when we talk about structures and making sure that when it's in, as we're calling it, an act of God, but a disaster happened, that these folks can, or people that have been impacted by a disaster can tap into these funds. So if any of my colleagues would like to inquire of me as we are working on that language that was sent over this morning, that would be helpful. I could tell you it's coming soon, right off the press. But again, this is, I think what you see is just government, local government coming together as we are waiting, as we know that special session in Jeff City have been called this week for our state reps and senators who have been amazing. The St. Louis delegation from each state representative, I don't want to miss a name, but each senator have been standing in the gap and supporting the efforts that have been going on. They're going back into session as well as we'll be hopefully looking to get support from the federal government. But I think Board Bill 23 and Board Bill 24 shows how, local government, as I continue to say, government is slow. Local government here in the city of St. Louis, we are all working together to try to figure out ways that we can support folks that have been impacted. Also understanding a lot of our colleagues at this board, personally, homes have been impacted. So with that, I would open up for any discussion.
Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. First, I want to thank the Alderman from the 14th, other members of this body that worked on this bill and on the companion bill. And at this point, I would move to make this bill in bank.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we make Board Bill 23 in bank. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Board Bill 23 is now in bank. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Will the Alderman from the 14th yield for questions?
The Alderman from the 14th yield to questioning from the Alderman from the 4th.
I will.
Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Alderman, so these funds, they come from ARPA dollars that we had voted on some time back, right?
So originally the funds was coming from ARPA. When we voted on it, I want to say when I kind of first got to the board in 23, the previous administration set aside $100,000 in ARPA funds to help this program kind of get set up and be able to move. Since then, and the language and those ARPA funds was just to kind of give some initial money to the program. And the language of the bill, additional funds to keep the program going will be coming from fines from the building division. So when you look at this is being housed out of the building division, the impacted tenants fund. So when you look at the building division budget in the FY26 year, which I want to thank all the members of budget that have been diligently diving into departments and meeting on a regular to make sure we try to get a budget done in before July 1, knowing that the Board of Aldermen gets a budget kind of very late. But in FY26, you'll see there is appropriation of $160,000 that is scheduled for this fund, and hopefully been working with Paul Payne and the President's office to try to figure out how we can, add more understanding that there's going to be a lot of need, and the amount that's in the fund right now is a good start, but nothing will ever be perfect, but we definitely want to make sure that we're adding more into that pot so that we can help as many people that are already, to be honest, been seeing stuff on Facebook where they're being told they have to leave their homes, even if they got a green or yellow sticker that's not condemned, that is a tenant being told that they have to leave at a certain time and, just don't have the funds to relocate.
Thank you for that, Alderman. And so just to be clear, these are funds that were already, these were federal funds that were already earmarked for something very specific, and we're just expanding the scope just to include natural disasters then?
Yes, so these funds were kind of twofold. The funds were already established with the ARPA funds, to set the program up. And when we set the program up, definitely didn't know that at some point that there was going to be a disaster. So in talking with, I would say Impact Attendance Fund, and was already, I think, a priority of myself, and I definitely know the president with some community organizations supporting this, making sure that there was more money going into it. And then when this happened, we happened to read the legislation, and actually Ms. Valerie Russell from Department of Human Service was in front of Budget Committee and said, in this time, you guys, as I was asking questions about it, you may want to re-look at the language to make sure that folks have been impacted by the disaster can also tap into these funds.
Thank you. Do we have any idea of how many individuals or households we may be able to help with this, or is that kind of still?
I was told when it was 100,000 that 100,000 was going to be able to roughly, it depends on the market of, people's rent, but that 100,000 estimately or roughly is going to be able to help about 100 people. So if we stay at that rate, like I say, once we pass the budget, July 1st, there'll be an additional 160 going into that fund that can ideally, hopefully, be 260,000. And who knows? I'm very proud of this budget committee. Who knows if any more go into that pot to try to help out? I know we're working diligently to figure out how we can support departments, but currently, with what's in it from that ARPA funds, about 100,000 for about 100 people at the moment.
Thank you. And excuse me. So, do we know how we're going to be kind of divvying these out? Is it going to be by need? Is it first come, first serve? How are we going to actually allocate these funds?
That's a good question. I know the Alderwoman from the first, I think, brought this up in HUD's committee yesterday. So the funds will go through DHS, and then DHS will then, and they're already working, that's why we're tightening every little piece of language. For the last, 24 hours to the beginning of this week, have been in deep conversations with Ms. Russell, Valerie Russell, who's the Deputy Director of DHS, and they have been in communications with Employment Connections, who will be administering this program, trying to dot all I's and cross all T's to ensure that they know kind of who would be first, and they're working with the building division to also know what buildings have been impacted by this disaster, so that not any and everyone can just say, hey, I've been impacted or I've been kicked out and actually haven't been kicked out. So I have to tip my hat off to Ms. Valerie Russell, who has been working since the beginning of this week to go over the bill over and over, working with Employment Connections to make sure that the most impacted individuals will be actually able to receive these funds.
Thank you for that. And then one last question, just because the two funds have been conflated a whole lot. There's no RAM settlement dollars going towards this particular board bill, correct?
Correct. There's no RAM settlement dollars towards this board bill. There's no dollars at all. So the funds were already set up through ARPA. When the board bill happened, at the same time, they established funds through ARPA. And in the board bill, it says continuing funds will be through the building division. So that's why in FY26 budget, you see 160,000 going, but there is no RAMS money being used for this fund. This is all general revenue from the building division, fines and fees.
Thank you, Alderman. And with that, I see the clerk has put a copy of the amendment on everyone's desk, and I'll yield.
All right.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Alderman, for bringing this forward. I think this is absolutely necessary. I have a lot of renters in just my ward alone who are asking themselves what they're going to do next as they look for a new location. The security deposit that it takes to rent a new unit can be up to $1,000, and that's hard to come up with very quickly if you're living paycheck to paycheck. So I think this will be an excellent help to people who need it. The question I have, and I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to kind of get it out there, is I think we have a lot of homeowners right now who are going to be displaced as well, and they might need to move to a rental unit in the meantime, would they be eligible to be able to use this fund?
Am I being asked to yield?
Yes, I guess I am asking the Alderman from the 14th if you would yield the questions.
The Alderman from the 14th yield to questioning from the Alderman from the 9th.
Yes.
So just to repeat the question, would homeowners who are displaced because their home is now not habitable be eligible to receive assistance fund to go and reside in a rental unit?
Not from this fund, no. This is just for tenants. So individuals who are tenants from a landlord would be able to tap into this fund. But hopefully there's another board bill that is coming after this that will kind of address some relief from homeowners, especially if their home has been condemned or cannot be habitable to live in anymore, to kind of help on their assessment of their property value, but not from this fund. This would only, when we originally passed it, is just focusing on tenants.
Thank you for that. And one more question. Would people be eligible only if they're using this money to rent a new apartment within the boundaries of the city of St. Louis?
In the bill, it does not have a scope where they would have to move. So if they move out of the city, they would also still be eligible because ultimately we still want to help people find housing. So it does not put requirements of the scope of where they would have to be.
Okay, thank you for that. I do want to flag that as a potential issue as we consider recovery from this disaster. The city is already facing severe population loss, and obviously it's not going to get any better when we've just lost a significant amount of housing. It concerns me that we might be paying people to move out of our city, but I also absolutely recognize the need that you need a roof over your head, and this is where the city-county divide or our regional balkanization just doesn't make any sense, because if you need a house, you need a house, and it doesn't really matter if you're going to go, a few steps over Skinker Boulevard or a few steps over the river. You ought to be able to get that shelter you need. But I also want to just kind of emphasize the need for our city to have a plan going forward to make sure that we have enough housing so that people who want to stay in the city and people who we want to stay in the city can do so. Thank you, Alderman. I appreciate your answers.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderman from the 14th, I think you have your amendment ready.
Yes, thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to all the amendments are on everybody's desk, and then for folks that are online is in the drive, I move to adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 23.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 23. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Again, this is just a little bit more clarifying language around eligible uses of people that could be able to use this. Again, we already stated in the definition of what an act of God is when it comes to a devastation, but we just want to be clear and make sure that it's also in on page 1, line 14 through 16, in the eligible uses that, or due to a residential property destroyed or damaged by the act of God of such magnitude as activated by city emergency management agency and the result of the structure. And we use the word structure because since the building division will be helping the building division call building structure in their definition be unoccupied or uninhabitable. So again, just more cleanup language just to ensure that in the eligible uses that we are just going a little deeper and defining a little bit more of what that act of God mean. And with that, I would open up for any questions.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st. We adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 23. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. If just for clarity, since we amended a bill, do we need to do the embanked again since the bill has changed?
No.
Okay. With that, I would, again, I just want to thank you, Madam President. I want to thank the mayor's office, and I want to thank my colleagues at the Board of Aldermen for, all of us coming together in a time where we're in unprecedented times that didn't know that something like this was going to happen. But I would say, this board for the last week has been very unified and have been trying to work together to try to figure out how do we all, regardless if our ward has been affected by the storm or if our ward has been affected, how do we support not one another, but also support everybody in the city of St. Louis, supporting our residents and supporting the ones that are in the most need. And I just appreciate the energy and the resilience, not only from this board, but I'll be remiss. This legislation started actually with community members who have also been on the ground day in and day out, cutting trees down, providing resources, and making sure that our residents in the city of St. Louis have a little bit of hope when in a time of need that we never thought would happen. But again, I just want to thank everybody, and I am glad that we at the Board of Aldermen and local government is taking, I think, one of many steps outside of this. There'll be another bill, but taking steps to try to help the most impacted individuals from this tornado disaster relief. And with that, I would close.
Need to make a
I
motion
move to perfect Board Bill 23 as amended.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill 23 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Board Bill 24, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd and the following co-sponsors: Mayor Spencer, President Green, Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Sanye, Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderman Browning, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Keys, and Alderman Aldridge. An ordinance adopting the provisions of Section 137.082 Revised Statutes of Missouri, providing residential property owners whose homes are severely damaged or destroyed by natural disasters with a pro rata reduction in property tax assessment, and adopting the other assessment provisions of Section 137.082 pertaining to the newly constructed property, containing a severability and an emergency clause.
Alderwoman from the 13th, you're recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 24.
Thank you, Madam President and Board. I ask for favorable consideration for Board Bill 24.
Would you like to move to perfect Board Bill 24?
Yes.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill 24. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. We had a robust discussion yesterday at HUD's in regards to this bill, and we were very clear that in the disaster that we're in, the people that will be impacted, we need to address how we would support and help those people to move forward in some form. We met with the assessor's office and we met with the mayor's office to try to critique this, to make sure that we don't have, as I could say, bad actors take advantage of this. And so I was excited when the assessor came up and made it clear that when people put applications in, then his staff and the building division will ensure that these buildings are a part of the tornado damage and that they are realistic, because we do know we have people that will try to take advantage of this. And so I yield for any questions that I might have at this time.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we embank Board Bill 24.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we embank Board Bill 24. Any discussion on the motion to embank? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Board Bill 24 is now embanked. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I just want to thank Alderwoman Boyd, the mayor's office, and the assessor. The assessor was in front of HUD's yesterday and found kind of a a loophole through the state statute where we could be able to do something like this. And again, it just shows how collaboration is really is kind of the main focus and theme in these times since we had a disaster. So all departments are trying to figure out what we can do from city government to try to rebuild and make sure that we're supporting individuals, again, that's been impacted. So I do want to thank Alderwoman Boyd for her leadership, the mayor, the assessor, and also yourself, Madam President, for being a co-sponsor on the bill. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I want to thank Alderwoman Boyd for her leadership of the bill in the mayor's office and the president's office. And also just wanted to put on the record while folks are watching that what we discussed a lot in the HUD's committee is that this bill, a lot of it emulates what is in the state statute directly. A lot of the city's discretion relies in the application process, and there was a lot of communication from the mayor's office saying that they were, just very aware of some of the things that Alderwoman Boyd mentioned of putting some safe rails and guardrails in to ensure that the folks who qualify for this are individuals that were indeed impacted by the tornado. And so in the meeting, Director Milberg actually, we kind of talked about having and kind of have already had some conversation about what that can look like in those guardrails. So I just want to uplift to my colleagues that if you all have any ideas about specific things that could be in an application, I know Alderman Cone of the 3rd Ward mentioned the idea of mentioning, the executive order that we did in the city and just putting some things in to help make sure that it is individuals. But I do want to just make sure that I go on the record and highlight that I think it's really important that that application only, makes it so that there's as many safe rails and guardrails in place that impacted people are there. As someone who represents a ward that was not as impacted, there has been some commentary from individuals implying that they have been just as impacted as others. And I've been very clear, show me the blocks and the communities and the homes that have been completely desecrated. But I know that that is out there. And so I just wanted to go on the record while we're having this conversation and make sure that we, just uplift the importance of what is on that application and uplift the importance of making sure that there's proper guardrails in place so that the people who are in dire need of these resources are the ones who get it and not folks who might want to exploit it or might be a bit entitled. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 5th.
Madam President, members of the board, permission to inquire of the Alderwoman from the 13th.
The Alderwoman from the 13th yield to questioning from the Alderman from the 5th.
I will.
Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Alderwoman, first, thank you for your efforts on this particular legislation. It is impressive at the speed that you work to put this legislation in front of us, so thank you. I did have an opportunity to listen to the HUD's Commission meeting yesterday, as well as the testimony of Assessor Ordway. I do have a question. I won't call it a concern, but a question, not necessarily with what the intent of this bill is. I get it. I understand it. I think it's a good thing. But perhaps an unintended consequence, and that goes to the assessment of new construction. I know that we are adopting Section 137.082 in its entirety if this board bill passes. My question goes to the issue of subsection 1 that talks about assessment of improved real property on occupancy or the first day of January in the 4th year. What my concern is that we will have properties outside of the affected areas, in places like the 5th Ward, for instance, where someone undertakes new construction and the assessment wouldn't otherwise happen in the odd-numbered year, like is what we're undergoing right now. Perhaps that is an acceptable response under the circumstances. But I'm curious, and I didn't hear anything yesterday with respect to when the assessor will undertake the assessment of those new builds. And what I have in mind, Alderwoman, is when there is residential property that has been demolished, a new build happens. Will that assessment happen after occupancy as defined in the statute, or must we then wait until after that 4th January? Can you educate me on that? I missed it yesterday if it was discussed.
And thank you, Alderman. I appreciate your question. If I'm not mistaken, it was discussed because that question did come up, and the assessor did address it. Because I want to say Alderwoman Hubbard had that question also, and Alderman Cone. Those two had questions in regards to the developments and new housing that was coming up. And so I want to say, and I'm not, don't quote me, but I want to say that they were looking at that wouldn't be impacted in regards to that. It would be where we were targeting the people that have been impacted by the tornado.
Yes, ma'am. And I understand that. I did hear Assessor Ordway talk in terms of when the new residential property would come on the books. I think on the books is the phrase he used. And again, I like this legislation. I'm in support of this legislation. My question or my concern, my request, I guess, of the committee would be that when we get on the other side of this response, we look at this question to make sure that we don't have an unintended consequence, that we're not looking at these new residential properties until year 4. What I'm concerned about is oftentimes courts, when they see the word or, talks in terms of it's either this or it's that. It's one or the other. And again, after consideration by the committee, the decision might be this is a good thing. It encourages development. I'm just making this remark so that it is on all of our attention for down the line for consideration. That's my only request. And I appreciate your patience with my questioning.
No problem. Thank you so much, sir.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, I had the same concern. Actually have it pulled up on my computer because it seems like, just as the Alderman from the 5th has said, that we're giving an extra loophole to people who we weren't intending to do that. I thought there ought to have been more restrictive language instead of adopting 137.082 in its entirety, that we should have language that restricts it to those properties that are new, that are built in the affected area. I don't think it is an accepted unintended consequence that we would be given that across the board. I don't think that's something we meant to do. And if not changed right now, needs to be changed later to limit that, and or the bill, if it needs to be held, if there's not such a rush to finish it, to change the language to include something that limits it to because you start out in the board bill saying providing residential property owners whose homes are severely damaged or destroyed by the natural disaster with a prorated reduction in property tax assessment, and adopting the other assessments provision of section 137.082.R of the revised Missouri statute pertaining to newly constructed property, and containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. So I went through there looking for the part where we said that it would limit 137.082 to only that part that's in the affected area. And instead, we adopt the whole thing in its entirety. If you're looking at page 2 of 2, paragraph 1, line 3, pursuant to section 137.082.8, the City of St. Louis adopts the occupancy law is found in its entirety. And I think that conflicts with what the real purpose of the board bill is. And I think that when you have the courts also in the state of Missouri will look at plain language, and even though we're saying we're limited to where it has actually occurred, then we go on to say, but we're adopting the whole law, occupancy law, and then we would give people who were building in other areas that were not affected the same outcome as we would people in the areas that are affected. And that greatly concerns me. And I do support the bill. I don't support the entirety of the bill as it reads now. And I just, when they said that it was going to be taken care of, I guess my question is, how would the assessor then argue that that's not what it means when we're plainly saying that we're going to adopt 137.082 in its entirety? I think that somebody missed something somewhere.
Alderwoman from the 12th, are you wanting to inquire of the Alderwoman
Yes.
from the 13th?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'd like to inquire of the Alderwoman of the 13th.
The
If she would
Alderwoman
yield.
from the 13th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th?
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may
Okay.
proceed.
Okay, Alderwoman. So my question is, since we plainly say we're going to adopt Section 137.082.8 of the revised Missouri statutes in its entirety, which covers in its entirety the city of St. Louis, how then would the assessor say, well, we're only talking about the affected areas? Wouldn't we say, instead of found in its entirety, wouldn't there be something that says limited to the parts that are in, just like we say earlier, limited to the affected areas, some language therefore, so that we are not confused, or that other people can't come and argue that we wanted to apply to other sections that are not affected. The Alderman from the 5th said something like, well, maybe that's an unintended consequence, but I think it's an unintended consequence that we can close the loophole on so that it doesn't happen.
And so thank you, Alderwoman from the 12th, for that. And we did talk about that yesterday. And we did say that we were willing to go back to amend it to make sure it was clarity that it was only the targeted areas, because that question did come up. And so the mayor's office and the assessor, they did say that. And they said that we will work diligently, and they even invited other members to be a part of that to help us amend that to strengthen that bill.
Okay, well, that's the only part is that when you adopt a whole state statute and you don't limit it, then if I'm the person that's building a house in the 5th ward or the 9th ward or wherever, then I'm going to argue that I get that right too. And I don't think that's what it meant. So if we are committed to changing it, I have no problem supporting it, because I think it's important. Any little bit you can do to help, because my ward is greatly affected, and is affected by homeowners. A lot of people talk about renters, but I've always had a lot of homeowners, and I want them to have that right to rebuild and stay there. But I don't want to start getting rid of our taxes that are used for other things in other parts of the city, and people that just really don't need that. We've had enough tax abatement and other things, TIF and everything else in other parts of the city. And both of us know that we have not had it in the area that is affected. And if we're going to get this little chance, it should not be shared with other people. It should be targeted directly for the people that are affected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 13th, you are recognized to close.
I remove my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill number 24. All those in favor signify by... No, we weren't amended. It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill 24. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Report of engrossment.
We have none.
Can dispense with line item 18. Third reading and final passage of board bills consent.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 19. Third reading and final passage of board bills.
We have none.
Can dispense with line item 20. Reported the finally passed and signed by the president.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 21. First reading of resolutions and committee reports.
We have none.
Can dispense with line item 22. Second reading of resolutions, committee reports, and adoptions.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 23, courtesy resolutions.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 24, miscellaneous and unfinished business.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 25, announcements.
Today, May 28th, Public Infrastructure will have a hearing in the Kennedy Room at 3:30 p.m. Thursday, May 29th, Public Safety will have a Hearing in the Kennedy Room at 2 p.m. Friday, May 30th. Full board meeting in the Kennedy Room, in the chambers at 10 a.m. That's Saturday, May 31st, 2025. Budget and Public Employee will have a webinar at 10 a.m. for public testimony. That's the extent of the announcements.
Any further announcements? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Budget Committee will resume immediately, as we say in the State House, upon adjournment. But as soon as we gavel out, I need all budget members back in the Kennedy Room because we have limited time with the airport. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? I do want to make sure that we thank all of the clerks for working over the weekend to make these special meetings happen. I'll give a big shout out to them. I mean, all of our staff across here, whether it's LA's, my staff, our secretarial staff, clerks, everybody has been working on overdrive since the tornado hit. And I want to just make sure that we are really recognizing the work of everybody at this board, putting in a tremendous amount of hours to respond to all the needs that are in the community at the moment. So thank you so much. With that, Alderman from the 14th, you are recognized on the motion to excuse.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we excuse the Alderwoman from the 10th Ward for necessary absence.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we excuse the Alderwoman from the 10th for necessary absence. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that the board Aldermen adjourn until Friday, May 30th, 2025, and the Board of Aldermen chambers at.
Second.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adjourn until Friday, May 30th, 2025, in the Board of Aldermen chambers at 10 a.m. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned.